In the sweltering heat of Medina in 632 CE, the leader who united the warring tribes of the Arabian Peninsula suddenly died. A unified empire now sat without a leader. The founder of a rapidly expanding state and a new world religion had left no clear instructions on who should succeed him. The arguments that erupted in the hours following his death established the primary religious and political fault lines that still define the modern Middle East. If you want to understand how a 7th century dispute anchors today's headlines, hit subscribe and let's go back to the beginning. To understand the deep-seated rivalries that anchor the region's geopolitics, we have to look at the core of this power vacuum, a raw debate over the nature of legitimate power. While Prophet Muhammad's closest family members prepared his body for burial, prominent community elders rushed to a place called Saqifa. Without an immediate leader, the fragile alliance of tribes was hours away from civil war. Faced with total collapse, the elders made a political decision. They bypassed his immediate family and elected his seasoned father-in-law, Abu Bakr, to stabilize the state. This is the phonetic breakdown of al-Sunnah wal Jama'ah. It translates directly to the people of tradition and consensus, providing the root for Sunni. This diagram maps the Sunni approach to authority. It relies on a decentralized consensus of global scholars to interpret texts. The caliph sits here at the center as a political administrator, a chief executive protecting borders and upholding law. That gathering at Saqifa established the system of governance and religious authority used by roughly 85 to 90% of the global Muslim population. While Abu Bakr was elected, another faction formed in the shadows. They argued that leadership could never be decided by an emergency vote because the Prophet had already chosen his successor, his cousin and son-in-law, Ali. This graphic breaks down the Arabic phrase Shi'at Ali. It translates to the partisans of Ali, which gives us the word Shia. To this group, spiritual and political leadership are impossible to separate. Authority does not come from a council of men. It flows directly from God to an infallible leader, known as an imam, strictly within the Prophet's bloodline. This split screen illustrates the structural divide. On the left, the decentralized Sunni model relies on community consensus. On the right, the Shia hierarchy is strictly vertical, with authority descending from a single node. For the partisans of Ali, the election at Saqifa violated the divine order. It set the stage for a physical conflict that would fracture the expanding empire. By the year 680 CE, the Islamic State had grown into a massive superpower ruled by the Umayyad dynasty. The reigning caliph, Yazid, was viewed by the Shia as a corrupt ruler who had hijacked the faith. Looking at this setup, you can see the tactical reality. The Prophet's grandson, Hussein, refused to pledge allegiance to Yazid. He was intercepted at Karbala by an opposing army of tens of thousands, armed only with a small band of 72 family members and loyalists. The Umayyad army cut off Hussein's camp from water for days. Then they slaughtered his followers. They decapitated Hussein and marched the surviving women in chains to Damascus. To understand the gravity of this event, imagine the religious resonance of the crucifixion of Jesus Christ, combined with the political execution of a beloved revolutionary hero. The scars of that massacre remain visible every year. Millions of Shia Muslims observe Ashura, performing rituals to physically reenact the deep grief of Karbala. Karbala locked a psychology of resistance into Shia Islam. It forged an identity defined by standing righteous against insurmountable odds, often suspicious of worldly power. For the next 9 centuries, both sects existed diffusely across the empire. In fact, by the year 1501, Persia, modern-day Iran, was predominantly Sunni. That year, a 14-year-old mystic warlord named Ismail rode into Tabriz and declared himself the Shah, founding the Safavid Empire. This map shows Ismail's problem. His small Persian empire was overshadowed by the Sunni Ottomans. To survive, Ismail made Shia Islam the state religion, forcing mass conversions to build an ideological firewall. Today, that 16th century firewall matches the modern Iraq-Iran border. This actual border crossing today, with its guards and concrete barriers, is a physical manifestation of a 16th century political strategy. The defining fault line between these two nations exists because an ambitious teenage emperor took a 7th-century theological dispute and used it to protect his territory. This history created two different structures of authority. In Sunni-majority countries, clerics are often employed by the state. But in Iran, the Shia developed an independent, structured clerical hierarchy. The Ayatollahs, like the one pictured here, command deep loyalty. Because their final imam is hidden, these independent clerics act as his earthly deputies. This independence allowed the Shia clergy to operate outside state control. Combined with the narrative of Karbala, resisting corrupt rulers, it turned the religious establishment into a political powder keg. In 1979, that powder keg detonated. The clergy mobilized massive crowds, using centuries of religious narrative to overthrow the state. An identity forged in 632 CE provided the psychological framework for a modern movement to overthrow a state, and set Iran on a path of deep geopolitical isolation. By the late 20th century, Iran was a rapidly modernizing nation. Backed heavily by the United States and the West, the country was pushing aggressively toward a cosmopolitan future. At the center of this change was Shah Muhammad Reza Pahlavi. He sought to revive the secular glory of the ancient Persian Empire. He viewed the Shia clergy as a backward relic of the past, suppressing their influence and driving their leadership into exile. But the Shah fatally misunderstood the psychological bedrock of his own country. He underestimated the enduring power of Karbala. By ignoring the deep-rooted theological identity of the masses, the monarchy turned mounting economic grievances into a holy cause, creating a pressure cooker ready to explode. In 1979, the pressure broke. The simmering resentment against the Shah's autocratic rule exploded into the Islamic Revolution, with armed civilians flooding the streets of Tehran to fight the state. Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini emerged from exile to lead them. He deployed a strategy that fused the ancient Shia theology of martyrdom with modern anti-colonial revolutionary rhetoric. He cast the US-backed Shah as a modern-day Yazid, the tyrant who slaughtered Imam Hussein in the 7th century. Once in power, Khomeini instituted a profound theological shift. Historically, Shia clerics maintained a quietist approach to politics. Khomeini dismantled this tradition by introducing Vilayat-e-Faqih, the guardianship of the Islamic jurist. He argued that in the absence of the infallible imam, a pious Islamic scholar must hold absolute political and spiritual authority over the state. Across the Persian Gulf, Sunni Arab monarchies watched in terror. Tehran was now openly calling for the overthrow of every secular and royal government in the Middle East. Iraq's secular Sunni dictator, Saddam Hussein, saw an opportunity. In 1980, he invaded Iran, aiming to crush the revolution before it could inspire Iraq's own suppressed Shia majority. The invasion backfired, acting as the ultimate unifying force. The newly formed Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps framed the brutal trench warfare as a holy war. The battlefields of Khuzestan were painted as a modern Karbala. Driven by the belief that martyrdom guaranteed immediate entry to paradise, young Iranian men wearing headbands bearing Shia imams' names cleared minefields with their own bodies. The conflict ended in a stalemate in 1988, but the psychological damage was permanent. The crucible of war traumatized the Iranian leadership and forged its militant modern identity. During the conflict, the leadership in Tehran realized the entire world, the United States, the Soviet Union, and the wealthy Sunni Arab states, had backed and funded Saddam Hussein. Iran found itself trapped behind a double-layered fortress of isolation. The first layer was the near enemy. The region fractured along sectarian lines, as Saudi Arabia positioned itself to defend global Sunni Islam against Iranian influence. The second layer was the far enemy. By declaring the United States the Great Satan and taking American diplomats hostage in 1979, Iran severed its ties with the global economic system, resulting in decades of sanctions. By the war's end, Iran stood in total isolation. Without superpower allies to provide modern hardware, they began developing an asymmetric method to project power beyond their borders. This strategy, asymmetric warfare, was born from necessity. Unable to win a conventional war against a major power, Iran sought to ensure that any attack on its soil would trigger chaos throughout the region. Because sanctions prevented them from buying fighter jets or signing traditional defense pacts, the IRGC's Quds Force began exporting the revolution. They leveraged their religious ties to organize and arm marginalized Shia populations in neighboring countries. In Lebanon, they funded and trained Hezbollah, transforming a group of marginalized Shia clerics into the world's most powerful non-state military actor. In Yemen, they backed the Houthi rebels. This created a security nightmare on the southern border of their arch-rival, Saudi Arabia. Across Iraq and Syria, they built a massive network of popular mobilization forces. These militias secured a vital land bridge stretching from Tehran all the way to the Mediterranean Sea. This is the axis of resistance. It is a decentralized shadow empire founded on religious devotion and the historical memory of Shia marginalization. To look at the modern Middle East, the proxy wars in Syria and Yemen, the tense standoffs in the Persian Gulf, and the rhetoric of martyrdom, is to watch the ghosts of the 7th century play out in real time. Modern economics alone cannot explain this map. Iran's entire modern geopolitical identity is the 1,400-year culmination of tying its national survival to the tragedy of Karbala and the bloodline of the Prophet. But the cost of this survival strategy has been isolation. The same ideology that defends their borders has starved their domestic economy and alienated them from the international order. By weaponizing its Shia identity, Iran built an unconventional empire that dictates the security of the region. Yet it remains an ideological island, surrounded by wary neighbors, still fighting the unresolved battles of the past.